All right. Hello, everybody. This is Customer Service TV. My name is Tal Schnall, and I have a special guest with us. And I connected with him in social media. So, there's a great way to connect with people. And I have his book here, but I want to introduce him first. His name is Anthony Iannarino, and he's a best-selling author, speaker, and coach on sales, success, personal development, leadership, and entrepreneurship. He is the founder of the Sales Blog, which is read by 60,000 people each month, and his Sunday newsletter reaches 80,000 people. Anthony is a thought leader in the world of sales and marketing, and I want to show you what got my curiosity. Highly recommend for you guys. If you look into any bookstore nowadays, this is it. This is a wonderful book. Anthony, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me.
Great. I'm a little bit of a violator and disruptor, so I know a lot of you guys are watching the Cowboys game, so I'm sure that you guys are tuning me out now, but this is a broadcast that you can obviously watch on YouTube on a later period of time. And I thought about adding value. It's a little bit of a different topic, but the more you dive into Anthony's inspiration and ideas and really thought leadership there in that field, you'll get a lot out of it. This book for me, and I shared it with Anthony, a Zig Ziglar quote that kind of stood out for me, and I was thought about the ideas there is that you first of all, you have to be before you can do, before you can have. You got to be the right kind of a person. So that's a Ziglar quote for you there. But you learn more about the book and the ideas. The book is The Only Sales Guide You'll Ever Need. And this book, Anthony shares why highly successful salespeople consistently outperform their peers. That is the question that Anthony is trying to unveil for us in this book. Anthony, I want to ask you first is what made you, I know people turn to you to write the book because they see a lot of good things. What really made it go for you that you really said, okay, I'm gonna press to get this going? What made it for you?
People kept asking me to give them a book, and it was just funny to me to get requests to write a book by readers who I give a blog post to every day. And I'm just thinking, how much more do you need? I write every single day, and I have people who read the blog every single day, thousands of them, which is just crazy to me. And many of them get it in their email box, which is even more crazy to me because we're already inundated with so much information. But a few years after I started writing, I got a request from a publisher to write a book. And I showed them the framework and the structure for this book. And they basically hated the whole first half of the book. And they said, we should kill that and just work on the second half of the book. And I said, there's no reason for a second half of the book without the first half of the book. So we parted ways. And then I had another publisher approach me. And they said, we don't really care what you write, as long as you buy 5,000 books from us when we print it. And I said, that doesn't sound right either. It didn't sound like a great value prop. But I had enough people keep asking me. They wanted a book, and they wanted something with borders around it, or what Seth Godin would call an artifact. You want it in one piece like this, not spread across blogs. So I decided to write the book myself. And I did, and I hired an editor, and we worked on it. And we were literally about 6 weeks away from self-publishing the book when Portfolio Penguin reached out and said, we'd like to talk to you about the book. And we came to a deal pretty quickly, and they pushed the book back about a year, just about a year from the time it was finished. So this book has been a long time coming for me for a whole bunch of reasons. One, I was asked to frame the book out very early, and then I wrote it myself, and that took me more time than it might have taken otherwise because I'm busy and I'm working. And that's the other reason you don't think you need a book. I mean, when you're working and speaking, some people do this so they get that kind of work. I was already getting that kind of work.
Right.
But it cost a year to wait for that to happen. So I'm thrilled that it's out, and I'm thrilled that it's being received the way it is.
Well, I'm glad you did because I'm pretty selective about the personal development books that I get, especially about, customer service and sales, and some of those things are very related in our industry. But I'm glad you did. And I think that's definitely not that you were strapping for pennies, but it will definitely scale up your brand with some of the things you're doing. So you've got an amazing brand that you already have with, and check out his blog and some of his podcasts. Or if you were a geek like me that loves podcasts and you're driving, you don't have music in your car, then you definitely want to listen to some of the stuff that he's got going on for him. So thank you so much for joining us. Anthony, you were an accidental sales leader in your organization. You had a different career in your mind in your early 20s. Can you share that story with us? What really made this? You were set on this career, and then something really accidentally happened that, truthfully, changed your direction for your entire life.
I think this happens to most of us.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all set out to do something different than what we end up doing in most cases, and you just kind of find your way. I set out to be a rock star. I mean, that was to me that looked like the best career move possible, especially as a 15-year-old boy seeing Def Leppard, and they were probably like maybe 6 or 8 years older than I was at that time, touring Pyromania, and then I saw David Coverdale and Whitesnake, and just watching the way women responded to David Coverdale, I thought you definitely have to start a rock band. And I did that. That took me to California, and I had to have a day job because you can't live in California and not be able to take care of yourself. I was about 22, and I went to work in a staffing firm, and I got a new manager, and he just recognized very early on that I had been winning accounts and our salespeople hadn't. And I never thought of myself as a salesperson. I just grew up in a family business. And when you didn't have something to do, you tried to do something else to further the business. So for me, that was getting on the phone and trying to find out other people I could help. And I was making calls. I was going and seeing people. I was finding ways to help them, and they were giving me their business. And when he fired the 3 salespeople, he showed me a report, and basically I'd won all the accounts, the new accounts in the branch that year. And he forced me into outside sales, even against my will, which meant cutting my hair, not cutting all of it off, but I had to cut it up to shoulder length, and I still wore a ponytail, and I put a suit on. But he forced me into outside sales, and I did really well. First, I did really bad at it because somebody told me I was a salesperson. So then I thought I have to go out and do things to people to make them buy. And it took me a while to go back to what I was just doing, which was I'm going out and I'm trying to help people with a problem that they haven't been able to solve without me. I'm giving them new ideas. They're giving me an opportunity to work on their problems. And that's just always worked for me.
So it's a completely different mindset when you say those things, because when most people think about salespeople, and we're going to talk about this, especially the chapter about caring really caught my attention. It's my favorite chapter. But you introduce really the premise of your book. You talk about the sales equation, which is the success blueprint of what it takes to be a highly successful leader. And you talk about those 3 things, and share with us those 3 and how. I know that you've got your inspiration through an idea there, but why made you think that, okay, these are the 3 pillars that I really, if I have to mold a successful sales leader, they're getting every resource in that model.
Yeah, mindset, skill set, toolkit, and that's an interesting model I stole from my friend Gerhard Schwantner, and I heard him say it, and as soon as he said it, I realized, oh, I wrote a book on mindset and skill set. And I didn't have the framework for mindset, skill set, toolkit, but it is those 3 things. And it really starts with mindset. And it's interesting that you found you liked caring the best, because it's one of my favorite chapters too, and probably one of the least understood as the value that it creates, especially when it comes to trust. But it is one of the things that generates trust, is the fact that you care about getting somebody else an outcome. The mindset comes first, because who you are matters more than what you do. And what I mean by that is you can have all the skills in the world, but if you're not the kind of person that people want to do business with because you're self-oriented, because you're pushy, because you're manipulative, because you're desperate, because you're pessimistic, you're not a great time to be around, because you're not resourceful and you don't have ideas, you're not going to win business. So the mindset comes first. And I mentioned the disagreement I had with the first publisher who asked me for this book. They didn't understand why any of the mindset attributes came in because they were used to just writing skills-based books. They think it's the skills that people need, and it is, but after they get the mindset. So it's the beliefs, the behaviors that drive the actions. And so once you have that part right, then the skill sets start to make sense.
Well, I'm going to tell you why there's so much value in your book, and I don't just say to market the book, because here's what happens, and I think your point is so valid there. What happens is that people, whatever industry they're in, they get the technical aspect, the knowledge of the competence in their field, and then they go buy personal development books. So they may buy John Maxwell, they may buy Zig Ziglar, they might buy Brian Tracy. And so what your book does, and this is for the audience that again, I'm not trying to sell you the book. What I'm here to say is that, and it's also kind of a cost effective, you're gonna buy those personal development books, which are great. But what Anthony does, he gets the mindset, the psychology, and the daily habits that you need to have, and also the skill sets and the toolkit that you really need to pick it up and run with this, not only in sales, but also any other industry. So I think, Anthony, you really share a good point about the personal development has got to have, it's a big part of being the best sales leader, right?
It is. It's a big part of it. And it's why it comes first. And ultimately, you were talking about Zig Ziglar, and I have a thing that I say that's similar to something that he says, but I mean, it's be more, do more, have more, and contribute more. Right. And it does always start with be. It is, who are you at your essence? What are you about? That's where the results are really generated. And you know what? It's still, and Bob Berg gave me a great quote I've used in the book. People still buy from people that they know, like, and trust. And that's always going to be the case. We're always going to want the relationship where we want to work with this person because they're the right person and they care about us and they're here to help us and they serve and they come up with ideas and all the things that differentiate you as a salesperson now.
Right. And just hello to Bob Berg. I actually got the idea to interview Anthony from listening to a podcast that Anthony he's been at the podcast 3 different times, and the first interviewee on Bob's Berg. So Bob, if you're watching this, hello to you. You're a great thought leader in the sales industry as well as under any other industry that you're providing value in. Anthony was adding value on one of your podcasts, so it got me intrigued and hooked. Let's talk about a term you say. It's called it is with the right mindset. You begin with the me management. What is me management about, and why is it such a hype? Most people kind of get turned off when they have to think about discipline and habits, and they get just kind of turned off, right? So how do you get excited about the me management part?
I love the me management part. I'm sitting here with a notebook right here, and it says Me Management, the Art of Personal Leadership. That's probably a book title for the future.
Oh, good. Good.
And I wrote it down because I think it's a book title.
Definitely.
There's only a certain kind of people that this appeals to, and I know that. And I know that the culture that we live in is a culture that says, look for the hack, look for the shortcut, try to find a way not to have to work hard. Try to find a way to shortcut your way so that you don't actually have to gain mastery. And there's all these concepts about secrets and tips and tricks and tactics, and it doesn't produce long-term success. And what happens if you want mastery of anything, you have to spend time really focusing on going deep and spending time doing the fundamental boring things that you have to repeat over and over and over again to reach mastery. And we have a whole culture now that says, don't do those things. There's an easier way. There's a faster way. And it's not true. It's a way to get a short-term result, but never to gain true competency or true mastery at everything or anything rather. And the one thing that you need to have mastery over if you want to be more, do more, have more, contribute more is you. And so this book basically starts with a premise that says selling is not situational. And success is not situational either. It's individual. And so you have people who would decide everything that is a problem for them is external. But people who are truly successful look and say, every problem that I have, the gap between where I am and where I want to be, all the problems there are internal. It all comes from me, and I can change that. And once you're empowered to say everything is my fault and everything is my responsibility, and I'm 100% for the direction of my life and the things that I can control, it gets easy for you. So it starts with that chapter. And a lot of people have commented on this chapter, like there's no fluff here. I mean, Anthony's going to make you do the work, and he's not going to tell you that there's a silver bullet. And if I had a silver bullet, I would give it to you. But the silver bullet is to first gain mastery over yourself, because everything you do after that gets easier and better, because you have the discipline to stay on the plateau and keep doing the work and keep gaining the competency and keep getting better.
No, that's great. And I think that that's what happens to, unfortunately with media, with the media, they represent, if you look at, Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan, or some of those, they're celebrities by now, but look at their challenges, look at what they had to overcome, look at what they had to master, some of the day-to-day. I remember reading about Larry Bird, who was spending 3 hours before a game just trying to shoot 1,000 free throws or 1,000 3-pointers before a game where nobody would even be on the court. And how many times is that story being shared with people to see what kind of, in other words, if you want to be the best of the best, be successful, you're right. There is a path. I mean, there is no secret to success. You do have to do the work in order to become the best of the best and successful in sales. So that's a great point. I do want to move on to, not that the me management is not important, guys. Me management sometimes can be kind of a not the most sexy part about it, but it's definitely pays off, as Anthony says, because anything worthwhile in our world and everything that you do is hard work and paying the dues, as Anthony said. But I want to jump into my favorite chapter, which is, I know it's yours as well, is about chapter 3, and it's about caring and the desire to help others. So Anthony, when people think of salesperson, caring is usually not the first characteristic when it comes to, especially, if you go to a car dealership or other characteristics, it's usually not there. And I know reading your chapter completely changed my mindset with that. But talk to us about caring. And to me, when that chapter clicked, it was more about creating value in relationships. So talk to us about caring. What prompted that idea into sales?
For me, it's just what I recognized as being one of the critical attributes necessary for success. And I'll just give you a little bit of a backstory on this. The way that I came up with this framework was hiring, coaching, training, developing, managing, leading salespeople, working with other organizations. And you start to see a pattern that exists in sales organizations, particularly, and probably service organizations too, where they say that person's failing. They're not good at this job. They really don't belong in that role. And I would look at that individual and say, no, that's not exactly true. They're missing a couple things. They've got deficiencies in a couple areas. So somebody would say, they're just a terrible salesperson. And I would say, no, they just lack the self-discipline to do the prospecting that they need to. It's just a discipline problem specifically. Or they would say, this person's just a total pain. They can't do anything. And I would look at them and say, no, they're just not resourceful, and they have to be taught to be creative. And you're coaching them in a directive way instead of a non-directive way. So they are a dependent because you made them one. And I started to find all these different attributes, and I wrote them down. There's 17 in the book. There's really 21 when I wrote the original draft of the book. So I'm never going to tell you what the 4 other ones are. You'll just have to wait until I release the hidden chapters.
Yeah, please do.
On the blog posts. But there are 4 other ones that you only have 60,000 words for a book. So we didn't have room to fit everything in, and we had to scale it back. So empathy was one. It ended up in caring, or part of it did. I would
love to get a chapter on empathy.
I still think that was an important piece of this. But what I noticed was some salespeople made everything about them. They made it about their product, their service, their solution, their company, their commission check in some cases. I mean, horrible things, talking about how much they're going to make off of a deal and saying things like, I really need this deal. And it was about them. And what they were displaying was a self-orientation. And the sale became not about how do I help you, but about how do I help me. And it's repellent. I mean, it works against you as a salesperson. And I saw other salespeople who are really good at never ever talking about themselves or their company or what they would ever stand to gain. And even in situations where we might say something like, we're in business to make a profit. We need a win-win deal. And salespeople think that's perfectly fine language. But it says, I'm trying to be profitable. And then somebody's thinking, well, how profitable at my expense? And I noticed better language like, I want to make sure that we make the right investment here together. And so what I'm afraid of is if you don't invest this amount, we're putting these outcomes at risk and we're opening ourselves up to bad things happening. It was always about the customer. And it just turned out that the more somebody cared, the easier it was for a customer to trust that person. I think all of us recognize this. If you would just tell salespeople, be the salesperson that you want to call on your elderly mom or your grandmother, or your spouse. I mean, that's the salesperson that you should be, because it's easy to buy from you. If I know that you're looking after me and that you're going to take care of me and that you're going to get me the outcome that I want, it's easy. If you make it about you, it's just very hard to generate trust. And and in the book, I say this, it's not a tactical thing that you can do. You just actually have to be somebody who cares about other people, or you're going to make selling really hard.
And I totally agree, because I think that's where the relationship between sales and service comes in, is that you're not just there to push the product, you're to actually build a relationship that will give them great customer service, great relationship, great value. But at the same time is that, if you talk to someone and you're trying to push something and their dog passed away and you're not really empathizing with their situation, then most likely you've lost the opportunity to maybe somewhere in the future they'll connect with you because you cared, and you're saying, hey, look, there's a human being in front of me. They have some situations going on in their lives at the moment, but let's see how we can overcome that. Or it could be the other way around. Maybe somebody's getting married and they're so busy planning for a wedding that they just don't have the time for you to talk to you right then and then. But through caring, through that empathy and relationships, you're able to actually achieve more than what some of the other people are doing. Right?
I agree.
So, and that's a great chapter to dissect all of this in regards to building those relationships. Another one is competitiveness. You always hear or see people who are in the sales field that are it is a competitive DNA for many of them, and that's what I find, as well as you've said that too, is that I think that you're really shifting the perspective there about competitiveness, and I want you to talk to us about that, because not only individuals but businesses, organizations are, they're very numbers oriented, results oriented. If you didn't get the right numbers, talk to us about that competition perspective that you offer in the book.
There's healthy competition, and then there's hyper competition. And hyper competition is anything at any cost, even if it's illegal or immoral. That's not good competition, and that's not how we think about it as value creators and as people who go out and make a difference in the world. The way that we think of it is it's a contest to see who can create the greater value for a client or a customer. And when you think of it that way, I'm going to create greater value than you, and then you're going to respond to that and say, wait a second, I'm going to create greater value than Anthony. And then I have to try to match that. And we continue to create greater and greater value for customers because we have a healthy form of competition. So it's not about saying anything bad about your competitor. It's not about being hyper competitive in any way, shape, or form. It's a contest to see, can you be better in the way of creating value and serving customers? And I think that this is an important concept. And I've had some criticism about this chapter from a few people who know me, who say, you're the most abundance-minded person I know. And this sounds like scarcity, and there is no scarcity. And scarcity is what causes bad behavior. There's plenty of opportunities, but it is a zero-sum game when you compete for a client's business. Somebody wins, somebody loses. When you lose, you don't lose forever. And it doesn't mean that you lose another client. It means that you win some and you lose some. But it's a contest to see who really can do the greater job serving. And whoever can do the greater job serving and creating value, retaining that client by creating additional value, new value, and going from quarter to quarter, continually upping their game, those are the people that win. And what failure and losing is in this kind of a competition is just feedback. It's feedback that says you need to change your value proposition so that you can be more competitive. And I do think it's a zero-sum game, and I don't think that salespeople and sales organizations really pay enough attention to that. And you're supposed to be creating a preference, but like a lot of people in a lot of jobs, you go to work, you do the same thing over and over again, so you punch the clock, and you forget that your real outcome in every interaction is to try to create the most value for your prospective clients. So you create a preference.
And it's so true, because I can relate in some of the things that I'm working on. It's been in the hotel business for 20 years, a highly competitive sales environment there, because every neighborhood has a hotel, and then the hotels are keep coming up, and restaurants are coming up, and the hospitality business is a highly competitive business, especially in a place like Dallas or New York, LA, some of those big, Chicago, some of those places. It's very highly competitive, especially with brands. And so when it comes down to it, what I see is that obviously there's a budget for sales and marketing. There's a lot of efforts, millions of dollars being spent. But I always say, imagine that frontline employee, that frontline person who is really the ambassador of that brand. So important to have that relationship with that customer, because so much is invested, millions of dollars, and truly to get that team right, to get the superstars on your team so they can deliver that value. And things you're talking about in your book is really also building a team of competitiveness, but in a healthy way, that we can create value. If we didn't get this account, there's another way to go about it in the marketplace, and we can do some amazing things, right?
That's right.
So another kind of not kind of, but really important topic that is we're talking about effective communication. And I wanted to ask you, because a lot of emphasis is being done when you're being trained on selling a product. I think that what's out there is a lot of the value proposition, but in the focus is on selling and pushing the product. And you talk about you're really breaking it down nicely, the chapter about communication in your book. And you talk about how most salespeople are tell, and it's really bound to fail with that sort of communication. And I see the reason I wanted to share this with you, something you could probably relate to in terms of some of your experience, not necessarily, but in terms of exact experience, but networking marketing. You've seen that they're about to sell a product, but I'm wondering if they're listening as much as they're talking. You know what I mean?
I think that there are certain industries that do way too much talking and nowhere near enough listening. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that listening is more powerful because it generates trust. And one bit of research that's come out in the last couple of years is we've been taught to look people in the eyes when we're talking to them. But it turns out that looking them in the mouth when we're talking to them, when they're talking and they can visibly see you looking at their mouth, it generates greater trust in the individual. Mm-hmm. Than looking them in the eye. And I think that's an interesting little bit of scientific knowledge to possess, because what people want is they want to be heard. And in the book, I use Charlie Green's trust equation from The Trusted Advisor and Trust-Based Selling, 2 great books. And it's credibility times reliability times intimacy divided by your self-orientation. It's the intimacy part, though, that's the big driver for trust. Do you know me? Do you care about me? Are you listening to me? Are you here to help me? It's that intimacy part of it that makes a difference. And so we think that we're going to be able to talk somebody into buying. And really what we're going to be able to do is to generate enough trust to where they feel confident in buying from us. And listening does more to help you with that. So it should be practiced more. And in the book, I recommend just a 4 count when somebody's done talking. And you'll find out that they have a lot more to say if you give them space to keep talking. We think that when they take a breath that they're done. And so we interrupt them and we start talking. I noticed this when I was about 40 years old. I noticed I was continually interrupted. And no matter what I was doing, somebody would interrupt me. So I decided I'm just going to wait until they're completely done talking and run out of words. And it was shocking to me that the longer I would wait, the more they would fill the space with more and more important things for me to know. And it's that trust that allows the intimacy. You're actually listening to me. you might be the first human being that's actually listened to me. And so now I'm going to start pouring stuff on because I know you actually are there. And I think that that's an important thing. I'm not opposed to pitching. In fact, I have told people, I've called clients myself and said, listen, I just want to pitch you straight out. And they'll say, pitch me. Yeah, it's fine. There's a time for that. But that's after you have more of a relationship where you have the trust that you're going to do it in their interest and that they're going to listen. So I understand what you're saying with network marketers. There's a lot of we're excited, we're pumped up about our product, we have strong beliefs. I get it, but I think more listening would help that. That would help actuate that for them a lot better.
No, and I agree, and it's not to really bash that. I think that there's a great value in so many of those things are really boiling down to creating a relationship, the space for people to be who we not only be a successful sales leader, but in relationship to other people, we tend to not only, we make those buying decisions is so interesting, and to find out, okay, how much is it emotional, how much is it rational, you know what I mean, to where people are like, is it going to based on, I'm sure there's a rational side to it, but a lot of it is emotional. A lot of it is how you connect with someone, whether they connected with you, right?
It is, and it is, I would tell you, it's emotional. The human brain has the tremendous ability to rationalize the decisions we make after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
It's the emotional response. So it's very, very subjective. And I know that people will put a spreadsheet together to try to make a buying decision look objective. But the fact of the matter is, even deciding what goes on the spreadsheet is subjective. And
Right.
then weighting it is subjective. And then deciding how much trust you have with someone is subjective. And so they end up, what we do as human beings is rationalize what we really want, and that tends to be emotional.
Mm-hmm. Very, very true. Well, Anthony, I've really enjoyed your company and having a conversation, and I think that many people would benefit from your piece of wisdom here. You've got a lot more to offer. If this is the book that you must get, the only sales guide you'll ever need. And it's true. I actually have to agree. Once I read this book, I would say that is the only guide that we need. And Anthony, I need departing thoughts. Anything that you like to conclude with the podcast, sir?
I mean, I think that the best thing I could say is if you care about these kind of ideas, I think the book will help you become somebody worth buying from in the first place. And I think that this book starts with a premise that is selling is not something you do to somebody. It's something that you're doing for someone and with someone. And I think if that's the kind of thing that appeals to you, this is probably a good place to do some reading.
Great, great. Thank you, Anthony, and have yourself a great Sunday. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.